Hello, Night Seekers, and welcome to Lacuna Noir. This is where forgotten stories and gentle voices meet, carrying you softly into peaceful sleep, wrapped in mystery. Before tonight's stories begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let me know. And a little note before we begin. You may notice a few brief ads in the first 10 minutes, but after that, the rest of the video is completely ad-free. Just you, the silence, and the stories. So settle in, get comfortable, and let the night carry you. If you're drawn to these quiet, shadowed nights, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a story when darkness calls. You know what, though? I have always believed that if your dog sees something in the bushes and clearly does not like it, you should listen to them. I do not mean you have to believe every little thing your dog reacts to. Dogs can be dramatic. Anyone who has ever owned one knows that. They can lose their minds over a delivery driver, a squirrel, a plastic bag blowing across the yard, or a person wearing a hat they have decided is deeply suspicious for no reason at all. My own dog once nearly gave herself a heart attack because the Orkin man came to the door. He was just standing there in his work clothes, holding a clipboard, and she acted like the end of the world had arrived on the front porch. So no, dogs are not right about everything. But they are right about enough. That is the part I always come back to. A dog may bark at dumb things. A dog may get worked up over shadows or noises that turn out to be nothing. But there are certain things they understand better than we do. They know when something is moving in the brush. They know when an animal is hiding somewhere close by. They can smell things we would never notice. They can hear things long before we do. They can pick up on a change in the air, a small movement, a scent on the wind, a sound under leaves, a presence in the dark. And maybe I sound strange for saying this, but I do not see any reason to doubt them when it comes to things we cannot explain either. People like to act as if humans are the smartest creatures in every situation. We like to believe we can judge danger better than anything else. We tell ourselves we are rational. We say it's probably nothing, and then we walk closer to check. We hear a noise outside and convince ourselves it is the wind. We see our dog freeze at the tree line and tell them to calm down. We laugh it off because the idea of turning around and leaving feels silly. Nobody wants to feel like they were scared away by a bush. But dogs do not care about looking silly. That is what makes them honest. A dog is not standing there thinking about pride. A dog is not worried about whether their friends will make fun of them. A dog is not trying to prove they are brave. If something feels wrong to them, they show it. Their body goes still. Their ears lift. Their tail lowers. Their nose points toward the dark place where something is hidden. Sometimes they growl low in their throat, and it is not the same bark they use for the mailman or the neighbor's cat. It is deeper than that. It is a warning. When a dog gives you that kind of warning, you should pay attention. I have heard people say, well, it was probably just a raccoon. Or, it was probably a fox, or maybe there was a possum in there. And maybe they are right. Maybe it is only a varmint. Maybe there is nothing supernatural about it at all. Maybe your dog is reacting to a real animal tucked under the brush, watching from the shadows. Maybe it has teeth. Maybe it is sick. Maybe it is cornered. Maybe it is just waiting for you to take one more step too close. That alone is enough reason to leave. People forget that normal things can be dangerous too. You do not need a ghost in the bushes to have a bad night. A wild animal can hurt you. A snake can be hidden where you cannot see it. A rabid raccoon can act wrong. A coyote can be closer than you think. Even a scared animal can do damage if it feels trapped. So if your dog is telling you there is something there, and their whole body is saying, no, we should not be here, then why argue with that? But then there is the other possibility. Maybe it is not a varmint. Maybe it is something else. Maybe it is one of those things people in older places used to talk about in careful voices. A haint, a spirit, a bad thing, a presence that should not be standing just beyond the edge of the light. Maybe it is something that does not move like an animal, but still makes the leaves shift. Maybe it has no scent that you can understand, but your dog can sense it anyway. Maybe it does not belong to the woods, but the woods have gone quiet around it. That is the kind of thing humans are very good at ignoring. We tell ourselves ghosts are not real. We tell ourselves the feeling of being watched is just nerves. We tell ourselves the sudden silence in the trees is normal. We tell ourselves our dog is being dramatic because that is easier than admitting the dog might know something we do not. And maybe ghosts are not real. Maybe every strange thing in the bushes has a normal answer. I am not saying people should jump straight to the supernatural every time a dog growls into the dark. But I am saying this: whether the thing is natural or not, the dog does not like it. And if the dog does not like it, that should be enough. There is a certain kind of reaction from a dog that feels different from the usual barking. If you have had a dog long enough, you know what I mean. There is the excited bark, the angry bark, the playful bark, the bored bark, and the someone is walking past the house bark. Those are easy to recognize. They are loud, sometimes annoying, but not always serious. Then there is the other one. The quiet warning. The body goes stiff first. That is usually the first sign. The dog stops moving like someone pressed a button. Then their head turns toward one spot, not scanning around, not sniffing casually, but locked on to one place. The ears go forward. The mouth closes. Sometimes the hair along their back rises. Then comes the growl, low and slow. Not a bark meant to scare something away, but a sound that says they have already decided something is wrong. When that happens, I do not ask many questions. If my dog is looking into the bushes like that, I am not going to push past her and say, let's just see what it is. I am not going to laugh and drag her closer. I am not going to shine my phone light into the leaves and act like I am smarter than the animal standing beside me, the animal whose whole life is built around hearing, smelling, and sensing things I cannot. I am going to back up. I am going to listen. Because the dog has no reason to lie. That is what people miss. A dog is not trying to create a scary story. A dog is not trying to get attention in that exact way. Yes, they can be silly. Yes, they can bark at nothing sometimes. But when a dog is truly scared, when they are warning you with their whole body, they are not playing. Something has reached them. Something has crossed the line. And I think we should respect that. I know some people will always try to explain it away. They will say the dog smelled a raccoon. They will say the wind moved the bushes. They will say there was probably a stray cat or a possum or some other little animal hiding in the dark. And maybe there was. That is fine. I do not need the thing in the bushes to be a ghost for the advice to stay the same. If it was a varmint, leave. If it was a haint, leave. Either way, leave. That is the whole point. We get too caught up in naming the danger. We want to know exactly what it was. We want a clean answer. We want to say it was only an animal, or it was something supernatural, because that makes the story easier to file away in our minds. But in the moment when your dog is frozen beside you and staring into the dark bushes, the name does not matter. The category does not matter. The explanation can wait. The warning is already there. Your dog has said, in the only way it can, that the two of you should not be standing there anymore. So you get out of there. You do not have to run screaming. You do not have to make it dramatic. You do not have to tell yourself you believe in ghosts or monsters or anything like that. You just have to accept that something your dog noticed made them afraid or deeply uncomfortable. And that is enough information to make a smart choice. There is no prize for ignoring an animal's instincts. There is no reward for proving you are not scared of the bushes. There is no good reason to step closer when every natural warning sign is telling you to step back. Humans survive because we pay attention. Dogs survive because they pay attention even better. When you have one beside you, you are lucky. You have another set of senses, stronger senses, older senses, senses that still remember what the dark can hold. And maybe that sounds too serious for a simple dog reaction. Maybe some people would hear this and laugh. They would say, "Come on, it was probably nothing." And maybe, most of the time, it is nothing. Maybe 9 times out of 10, the dog is warning you about a rabbit, a trash bag, a neighbor, or the poor pest control guy who just wanted to do his job and ended up being treated like a monster. But it is that 10th time that matters. That one time when the bushes are too still. That one time when the night goes quiet. That one time when the dog does not bark wildly, but stands frozen, staring, growling low. That one time when you feel the air change and realize you suddenly do not want to know what is hidden there. That is when you should trust the dog. Because whether it has fur, claws, teeth, or something much worse, the dog has already made the decision for you. The dog said to get out. So you get out. The night after my mom died, something happened that I still do not fully know how to explain. I have tried to think about it in a calm and logical way many times. I have told myself it was grief. I have told myself it was my mind trying to give me comfort because I was hurting too much. I have told myself that when someone loses their mother, the brain can do strange things, especially during sleep. Maybe that is all it was. Maybe it was only my body reacting to shock, sadness, and exhaustion. But even after telling myself all of that, I still remember how real it felt. I remember the feeling of waking up. I remember the smell. I remember the presence in the room. And I remember knowing, in a way I cannot fully describe, that it was her. Losing my mom did not feel real at first. I do not think death ever feels real when it first happens, especially when it is someone who has always been part of your life. A mother is not just another person. A mother is one of the first truths you ever know. Before you understand the world, before you understand yourself, before you know what fear or comfort even means, she is there. Her voice, her touch, her smell, her way of moving through a room, all of it becomes part of the background of your life. You do not think about it every day because you do not think it will ever disappear. Then one day, it does, and your mind cannot accept the empty space right away. That first night after she died, I was not really sleeping like normal. I was exhausted, but it was the kind of exhaustion that feels heavy and sick. My body wanted rest, but my mind kept circling the same thoughts over and over. I kept thinking about everything that had happened. I kept thinking about things I wished I had said. I kept thinking about whether she knew how much I loved her. I kept thinking about how strange it was that the world could keep going when my mom was no longer in it. Somewhere outside, people were still driving, eating, watching TV, laughing, working, living their normal lives. But for me, everything felt changed. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep. I do not remember drifting off. I do not remember any dream before it happened. One moment there was only that dark, painful tiredness, and then the next moment, I was awake. I woke up suddenly from a dead sleep. That part is important because I am not someone who sleeps through everything. I am a very light sleeper. I have always been that way. A small noise in the hallway can wake me. A door closing in another room can wake me. A change in the room can pull me out of sleep right away. But there usually has to be something real to wake me up. Some kind of sound, touch, movement, light, or outside stimulus. I do not usually wake up for no reason, and when I do, I can normally tell it was because I was uncomfortable or because I had been dreaming. This was different. I woke up because I felt someone there. Not saw, felt. The room was dark, and I could not see her. There was no shape standing at the foot of the bed. There was no figure by the wall. There was no glowing outline, no face in the shadows. Nothing like that. If I had only opened my eyes and looked around, I would have said the room was empty. But it did not feel empty. It felt full. It felt like someone was standing right beside me, leaning over me, watching me with care. And instantly, before I even had time to think, I knew the feeling. It was the same feeling I used to get when I was a kid, and my mom would come check on me at night. When I was younger, she used to do that sometimes. I would be asleep in my room, or half asleep, and she would quietly come in to make sure I was okay. She did not always wake me on purpose. Most of the time, she tried not to. She would just step into the room, maybe adjust the blanket, maybe look at me for a few seconds, maybe make sure I was not too hot or too cold. Sometimes I would wake up just enough to know she was there, even before she touched me or said anything. It was a very specific feeling. The feeling of your mother standing nearby in the dark, checking on you, making sure you are safe. That was exactly what I felt that night. It was so familiar that for one short second, I almost forgot she was gone. My sleepy mind recognized her before the rest of me remembered the truth. It felt like being small again. It felt like those quiet childhood nights when the house was dark and she would come into my room softly, trying not to wake me, but I would sense her anyway. There is something about a mother's presence that a child knows deeply. It is not something you have to see. It is not something you have to hear. You just know. Then I remembered. My mom had died. The pain of that came back fast, but it was mixed with something else. I should have been terrified. I think most people would expect fear in a moment like that. Waking up in the dark with a strong feeling that someone dead is standing over you sounds like the beginning of a horror story. But I was not scared in that way. I was startled, yes. My heart was racing because I had been pulled out of sleep so suddenly. But the presence did not feel threatening. It did not feel wrong. It did not feel like something pretending to be her. It felt like my mom. Then I smelled lavender. That was her favorite scent. It was not just a faint idea of lavender. Not the kind of thing where you think of a person and imagine their smell. It was there. It was clear. It filled the space around me in a gentle way, like she had just walked into the room wearing it. Lavender always reminds me of her, even now. It was one of those little things that belong to her. Some people have a perfume, a lotion, a soap, or a candle they love so much that the scent becomes part of them. For my mom, it was lavender. And that night, in the dark, after I woke up feeling her standing over me, I smelled it. I lay there, completely still. I did not speak. I do not know why. Maybe I was afraid that if I moved or said anything, the feeling would disappear. Maybe I was too overwhelmed. Maybe some part of me understood that this was not a normal moment and that all I could do was be present for it. My eyes were open, but there was nothing to see. The room looked like my room. The shadows were where they always were. The furniture was still. Nothing moved. But she was there. I do not know how else to say it. Her presence was so strong that it woke me right up. It was not a dream that continued after I opened my eyes. It was not a vague memory or a half-asleep thought. It was a strong, direct feeling, as real to me as if someone had placed a hand on my shoulder. I could feel her attention on me. I could feel the familiar comfort of her being close. It was like she had come to stand over me one more time, the way she had done when I was a child, to check that I was okay. That was the message I felt from it. Not in words. I did not hear her voice. She did not say anything out loud. But the feeling was clear. It was like she was making sure I was safe, making sure I was still there, making sure I could sleep. Maybe that sounds too simple, but that was my mom. Even after everything, even after death, the feeling I got was not dramatic. It was not some huge message about the afterlife. It was not some warning. It was just care. Quiet, gentle care. The kind of care a mother gives when she comes into your room at night and checks on you without needing thanks. For a little while, I stayed awake in that feeling. I do not know if it lasted a few seconds or a few minutes. Time felt strange because I was still caught between sleep and shock and grief. But I remember that the presence did not rush. It did not feel like something passing quickly through the room. It felt steady, calm, almost peaceful. Then, after a while, I felt this strong urge to go back to sleep. That was strange, too. Not because I was tired, because of course I was. I was exhausted from grief. But this urge did not feel like ordinary tiredness. It felt almost placed inside me, like a gentle suggestion. Like someone was telling me without words, it's okay, go back to sleep. It felt the same way my mom might have comforted me as a child if I woke up from a bad dream. She would not make a big scene. She would calm me down, make sure I was okay, and tell me to rest. That is exactly what it felt like. The fear and shock slowly softened. The lavender was still there. The room still felt full of her presence. But instead of fighting sleep, I let myself sink back into it. I cannot explain why I was able to. On any other night, if I woke up suddenly because I felt someone standing over me, I would have stayed awake for hours. I would have turned on every light. I would have checked the hallway. I would have been too alert to rest. But that night, I felt comforted. I felt watched over. I felt safe. So I went back to sleep. When I woke up later, the room was normal again. The lavender scent was gone, or at least not as strong. The presence was gone, too. It was just morning, or whatever time it was, and the grief was still there, waiting for me. My mom was still gone. The world had not changed back. Nothing had been fixed. But something inside me felt different. Not healed. I do not want to make it sound like one strange moment erased the pain of losing her. It did not. Grief does not work like that. I still hurt. I still missed her. I still had to face all the awful days that come after someone dies, the calls, the memories, the sudden waves of sadness, the little moments when you forget and then remember again. But that night gave me something I did not know I needed. It gave me the feeling that she had checked on me one last time. I have tried to explain it away many times. I know the mind is powerful. I know scent memories can be strong. I know grief can wake people from sleep. I know that when you lose someone close, your brain can search for them everywhere. Maybe I woke up because of stress, remembered the way my mom used to check on me, and my mind added the smell of lavender because that was tied to her. Maybe it all came from inside me. Maybe it was a dream breaking into waking life for a few seconds. That explanation is reasonable, but it does not fully cover the feeling. The presence was too strong. The familiarity was too exact. It was not just I miss my mom. It was the same old childhood feeling of her standing there in the dark, making sure I was okay. It was so specific that it reached some deep part of me before my rational mind could do anything with it. And the lavender was there in a way I cannot forget. I do not tell this story to prove anything. I am not saying everyone has to believe it was a ghost or a visit from the other side. I am not even sure what I believe. Some days I think it was my grief. Other days, when I remember how real it felt, I think maybe love leaves something behind. Maybe a mother's care does not stop immediately just because her body is gone. Maybe if there's any way for someone to come back for a moment, they would come back quietly, in the way the living person would have done. My mom would not have wanted to scare me. She would not have appeared in some dramatic way. She would not have made the lights flicker or moved things around the room. That was not her. If she came back at all, she would have done exactly what I felt that night. She would have stood over me gently. She would have brought that familiar lavender scent with her. She would have made sure I was okay. Then she would have helped me go back to sleep. That is why, even now, I cannot let go of the idea that it might have been her. The night after my mom died, I woke from a dead sleep with the clear sensation that she was standing over me. I could not see her, but I did not need to. I knew that presence. I had felt it so many times when I was a child. I smelled her lavender. I felt her care in the room. I felt, without hearing a single word, that she had come to check on me. Then I felt like I was allowed to rest, so I closed my eyes again. And for that one night, in the middle of the worst grief I had ever known, I felt like my mom was still doing what she had always done. She was making sure I was okay. I have always tried to be a rational person. I do not say that to sound smarter than anyone else. It is just how my mind works. If something strange happens, my first instinct is not to call it supernatural. I try to explain it. I try to look for the normal reason first. Stress, grief, memory. The brain doing strange things when it is tired. The mind trying to make sense of pain. Those explanations usually feel more believable to me than ghosts or spirits or visits from the dead. But there is one dream I had years ago that still sits in the back of my mind. Quiet and heavy. I can explain it if I want to. I can tell myself it was just my subconscious working too hard because I was grieving. I can tell myself it happened because I never got to say goodbye properly. I can tell myself my mind made the dream because I needed some kind of ending. All of that makes sense. And still, some small part of me wonders if maybe it was more than that. It happened the night my grandfather on my dad's side died. He was not living close to us at the time. He was in China, far away from where I was, and because of that, I did not get to see him before he passed. That has always bothered me more than I like to admit. Death is hard enough when you are near someone. It is even harder when they are far away, when there is distance between you, when you know the last moments are happening somewhere else and there is nothing you can do to reach them. My grandfather was not a very emotional man, at least not in the way some people are. He was not the type to make big speeches about his feelings or cry openly or say dramatic things. He loved his family, but he showed it in his own quiet way. There was a certain stillness to him, a certain seriousness. He could be warm, but he was not soft in an obvious way. He did not throw his arms around people and tell them everything he felt. He carried his emotions deep inside, where most people could not see them. Because of that, I never expected any grand goodbye from him. Even if I had been able to see him one last time, I do not think it would have been some big emotional scene. He probably would have looked at me with that calm expression of his. Maybe he would have said something simple. Maybe he would have nodded. Maybe he would have told me to take care of myself, or to look after my sister, or to be good to my parents. He was that kind of man. Simple words, quiet meaning. But I still wish I had seen him. I found out later that he had been sad he would not be able to see me and my sister one last time. That detail has stayed with me. I think about it more than anything else. The idea of him knowing he was near the end, knowing he was far away, knowing we could not come to him in time, and feeling sadness over that. It hurts in a way that is hard to describe. Not loud pain, not sharp pain, more like a deep ache that settles in your chest and does not leave. That night, after he died, I went to sleep with all of that sitting inside me. I do not remember exactly what I was thinking before I fell asleep, but I know I was carrying that strange, helpless feeling that comes with loss. The kind of feeling where your brain knows what happened, but your heart has not caught up yet. You keep thinking about the person as if they are still somewhere in the world, just in another room, another city, another country. Then you remember they are gone, and the truth hits again. When I dreamed, there was no normal dream setting. No house, no street, no memory from childhood, no hospital room, no family gathering, nothing like that. There was only darkness. Not darkness like a bedroom with the lights off. It was deeper than that. It was like a black void, a space with no walls, no floor, no sky, no distance, and no sound. It felt empty, but not exactly frightening. It was not like a nightmare. There was no monster, no chase, no sudden fear. It was just blackness in every direction, endless and silent. And in the middle of it stood my grandfather. He was facing me. I can still picture him clearly. He was wearing his favorite outfit, the one he often had on when he would go out. He also had on the hat I always remembered him wearing. That detail made the dream feel real in a way I did not expect. Dreams are usually messy. Faces change. Clothes blur. Places shift. People turn into other people. But this was clear. He looked exactly like himself, dressed the way I knew him, standing there like he had stepped out of a memory and into that dark space just for me. He did not say anything. He just looked at me. His face was calm, but not happy. It was neutral, almost somber. That is the best way I can describe it. He did not look scared. He did not look angry. He did not look joyful either. He looked serious and quiet, the way he often did in life. It was the kind of expression that did not give much away, but somehow carried weight. Like he understood something I did not. Like he had come for a reason. But words were not part of it. In the dream, I did not speak either. I do not know if I could have. I do not remember trying. I just stood there looking at him, and he stood there looking back at me. There was no movement around us. No wind, no sound, no other people. Just him and me in that black, empty place. It lasted for a while. I cannot say how long because time in dreams does not work like real time. It might have been seconds. It might have felt like minutes. But it was long enough for me to notice the silence. Long enough for me to understand that he was not going to say anything. Long enough for the moment to feel intentional. That is the word that comes to mind when I think about it now. Intentional. He was not just a random image flashing through my head. He was not part of a busy dream where strange things were happening. He was simply there, facing me, completely still, as if he had come only to be seen. Then, after staring at me for that quiet stretch of time, he slowly turned around. He did not rush. He did not vanish suddenly. He did not float away or do anything dramatic. He just turned in the slow, normal way a person turns when they are leaving. Then, he began walking into the darkness. I watched him go. That was the hardest part of the dream. He had not said goodbye, but it felt like goodbye. Every step he took made him seem farther away, even though the black space had no real distance. The darkness swallowed him little by little. First, his face was gone because he had turned away. Then, his shoulders became less clear. Then, the shape of his hat and back faded into the dark. I wanted him to turn around again. I do not remember thinking those words in the dream, but I remember the feeling. I wanted one more look, one more moment, maybe one word, anything. But he kept walking. Then he disappeared completely. The moment he was gone, I woke up. I woke up with that heavy feeling people get after a dream that feels too real. For a few seconds, I did not move. I just lay there, staring into the dark of my room, trying to understand what had happened. My room was quiet. Everything was normal. But inside me, something felt different. The dream did not feel like a normal dream fading away. It stayed sharp. It stayed whole. I could still see him standing in that black void. I could still see his outfit, his hat, his face. I could still see him turning and walking away. At first, I tried to explain it to myself. Like I said, that is what I do. I told myself it was obvious why I had dreamed of him. He had just died. I had not been able to see him. I knew he had wanted to see me and my sister again. My brain was full of grief and guilt and unfinished emotion. Of course, it would create a scene where he appeared, looked at me, and left. That is exactly the kind of dream a grieving mind would make. And I still believe that is possible, maybe even likely. But the feeling of it was strange. It did not feel like my mind was inventing a story. It felt like I had been shown one clear moment. Nothing more, nothing less. There was no drama added to it. No words of comfort. No bright light. No angelic music. No message from beyond. None of the things people usually describe when they talk about visits from the dead. It was much simpler than that. He stood there. He looked at me. Then he turned and left. And honestly, that made it feel more like him. If my mind had tried to create the perfect goodbye, maybe he would have hugged me. Maybe he would have smiled. Maybe he would have told me he loved me and that everything was okay. Maybe he would have said he was proud of me or that he would watch over us. But he did not do any of that. He behaved exactly like the man I remembered. Quiet, serious, not overly emotional, present, but restrained. That is why I have never been able to fully dismiss it. I do not walk around telling people I believe my grandfather's spirit visited me. I would feel strange saying that with complete certainty, because I do not know. I am still mostly an agnostic rationalist. I still think the brain is powerful. I still think grief can shape dreams in ways that feel meaningful because we need them to. I know people have dreams about loved ones after they die all the time. It is not rare. It is not proof of anything by itself. But there is a difference between knowing that and feeling what I felt. That dream did not feel random. It felt like an ending, a quiet one, but an ending. It felt like he had stopped somewhere between where he had been and wherever he was going. Just long enough to let me see him one last time. Not to explain anything. Not to comfort me with words. Not to make me believe in something. Just to stand there. Look at me and leave. Sometimes I wonder if he knew I needed that. Or maybe he needed it too. Maybe, if there is anything after death, and I am not saying there is. Maybe he found a way to pass through my dream because he had not been able to say goodbye in life. Maybe the sadness he felt about not seeing me and my sister one last time was strong enough to reach us somehow. Maybe that was his way of doing it. I do not know. That is the honest answer. I do not know what happened. Part of me says it was only a dream. A powerful dream, yes, but still a dream. My subconscious took my sadness and gave it a shape. It placed my grandfather in the darkness, dressed him in the clothes I remembered, and let me watch him walk away, because that was the truth I needed to accept. He was gone. I had to see him go, because I had not gotten to see it in real life. But another part of me, a smaller part, that I do not usually listen to, says maybe he really did come by. Maybe he knew I would understand him better without words. Maybe he knew that a speech would not feel like him. Maybe standing there silently was the most honest goodbye he could give. Maybe turning and walking into the darkness was his way of telling me that he had to leave and that I could not follow. I have never forgotten the dream. I do not think I ever will. Over time, grief changes shape. The sharp edges soften. Life moves forward because it has to. People talk less about the person who died. Their name comes up now and then, usually with stories, small memories, little reminders, but certain moments stay untouched. That dream is one of those moments for me. It remains exactly as it was. Black void, my grandfather, standing there. His favorite outfit, his hat, his calm, somber face, his silence, his slow turn, his back disappearing into the dark. I still do not know whether it was my mind or something more. Maybe it does not matter. Maybe the meaning is the same either way. I did not get to see my grandfather before he died. He was far away, and he was sad that he would not see me and my sister one last time. But that night, in whatever way dreams work, I saw him. He looked at me one last time. He stood there long enough for me to remember him clearly. Then he walked away. And even though he never said a word, some small part of me has always felt like he came to say goodbye. I still have the phone call in my call history, and that is the part that makes it so hard for me to dismiss. If it had only been a dream, or a strange feeling, or one of those moments where your mind plays tricks on you when you are tired, I think I could have forced myself to forget it. I could have told myself that I imagined it. I could have laughed it off and moved on. But it was not just a feeling. It was not just a nightmare. It came through my phone, clear enough for me to answer, clear enough for me to hear my mom's voice, clear enough for me to panic and call my brother, and clear enough that the call remained there afterward like some kind of proof I never wanted. This happened on a normal day. That is one of the things that has always bothered me. There was nothing strange leading up to it. I was not watching a scary movie. I was not talking about ghosts or weird stories. I was not half asleep in bed. I was awake, doing ordinary things, in the middle of an ordinary day, when my mobile started ringing. When I saw that it was my mom calling, I answered without thinking much of it. She called sometimes for simple things. Maybe she needed help with something on her phone. Maybe she wanted to ask if I had eaten. Maybe she wanted to tell me something about the family. It was the kind of call you pick up casually, with no fear in your chest at all, because the person calling is someone safe. But the moment I answered, I knew something was wrong. My mom was speaking in a very low voice. It was not her normal voice at all. She sounded terrified, but she was trying not to make noise. Her words came out small and tight, like she was hiding somewhere, and afraid that if she spoke too loudly, someone nearby would hear her. She told me they were being robbed. At first, I did not understand. My mind did that thing where it refuses to accept bad information right away. I remember saying something like, "What?" Or, "Mum, what do you mean?" But she kept talking in that quiet, shaking voice. She said someone had entered the house. She said she and my dad were upstairs. I could hear fear in every breath she took. Then, I heard my dad in the background. He was not shouting. He was trying to calm her down. I could hear his voice, low and tense, telling her to stay quiet or calm down. Something like that. It was hard to make out every word because my mum was breathing so fast, and the phone sounded muffled, like she was holding it close to her face or covering part of it with her hand. But I knew my dad's voice. I knew it was him. He sounded scared too, even though he was trying not to show it. That was the moment the panic really hit me. There is a certain kind of fear that feels different from all the others. It is not like being scared by a noise in the dark or feeling nervous before bad news. It is a cold, heavy shock that moves through your whole body when you realize the people you love may be in danger and you are not there to help them. I could picture my mom and dad upstairs in their house, trapped, whispering on the phone while someone moved around downstairs. I could picture them trying to stay quiet. I could picture my mum shaking, and I could do nothing from where I was except listen. Then I heard some movement on the other end of the line, and my dad took the phone from her. His voice came through, rushed and serious. He said something like, "Call the police." I do not remember the exact words because everything was happening too fast, but that was the message. He told me to call the police, and then the call ended. It did not fade out. It did not slowly disconnect. It just hung up. For a second, I sat there frozen, staring at the phone in my hand. My body felt like it wanted to move faster than my mind could think. I knew I needed to call the police, but I also knew my brother lived closer to my parents than I did. If something was happening at their house, he could get there before anyone else in the family. I did not waste time. I called him. When he answered, I was already speaking fast. I told him someone had broken into Mum and Dad's house. I told him Mum had just called me and said they were being robbed. I told him I was calling the police and that he needed to get over there right away. He did not question me. He just said, "Okay." Then we hung up. After that, I called the police. I remember trying to explain what was happening while my heart was beating so hard that it felt like I could hear it in my ears. I told them my parents were at home, that my mum had called me scared, that someone had entered the house, and that they were upstairs. I was trying to stay calm enough to give the right information, but all I could think about was that every second mattered. Every word felt too slow. Every question felt like time being wasted, even though I knew they had to ask. Then, while I was still on the call with the police, my brother called me back. Seeing his name pop up made my stomach drop. I thought he had arrived there and found something. I thought maybe he was calling to tell me the police needed to hurry. I thought maybe it was worse than I had imagined. I answered his call in the middle of everything. His voice was different than I expected. He sounded confused, not panicked. He told me he had just phoned Mum. I said something like, "And?" He said they were fine. For a moment, I did not understand what he meant. Fine? How could they be fine? I had just spoken to her. I had just heard the fear in her voice. I had heard my dad in the background. I had heard him take the phone and tell me to call the police, but my brother kept talking. He said he had called Mom and Dad and they were at home. Nothing was happening. No one had broken in. There was no robbery. They were not hiding upstairs. They were not scared. They were just chilling at home like it was any normal day. I remember feeling almost angry at first because it made no sense. I asked him if he was sure. He said yes. He had just spoken to them. They were completely normal. There was no emergency. I ended the police call as soon as I understood there was nothing to report, though even saying that felt unreal. I did not know what to tell anyone. How do you explain that your mother called you, terrified, saying there were robbers in the house, and then 2 minutes later she says nothing happened? How do you explain that your father's voice was on the call too, telling you to call the police, when he was apparently sitting there calmly the whole time? I called my mom myself after that. She answered in her normal voice. That was almost worse. She sounded relaxed. There was no shaking, no whispering, no fear, no sign that anything had happened. I asked if she was okay, and she said yes. I asked if Dad was there, and she said he was. I asked if anyone had come into the house, if anything strange had happened, if she had called me a few minutes ago. She had no idea what I was talking about. She said she had not called me. My dad had not called me either. No one had taken her phone and told me to call the police. There had been no robbery, no footsteps downstairs, no hiding upstairs, nothing. I wanted to push it. I wanted to say, no, Mom, you did call me. I heard you. You were scared. I heard Dad. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way she sounded so normal. Maybe it was because I could already hear how crazy it would sound if I kept insisting. Maybe it was because I wanted, more than anything, for the whole thing to be over. So, I let it go. But I did not really let it go. Not inside. After the calls ended, I checked my phone. The call from my mom was there. It was in my call log. It had happened. I had not imagined my phone ringing. I had not dreamed the number appearing on the screen. I had answered a call from her phone, and that call was recorded in the history like any other call. That should have made me feel better, but it did not. It made everything worse. If there had been no call in my phone, I could have told myself I had a panic attack or a strange daydream. I could have blamed stress. I could have said I was tired and my brain made something up. But the call was there. The phone itself said it happened. And yet, my mom said she never made it. I thought about possible explanations for days afterward. Maybe it was a prank. But who would do that? And how would they make it come from my mom's number? Maybe it was some kind of crossed line or phone glitch. But that did not explain why the voices were my parents' voices. It did not explain why the story was so specific. It did not explain my dad telling me to call the police. It did not explain the terror in my mom's voice. I thought maybe my mom had accidentally called me and then forgotten, but that made no sense either. People do not forget calling their child while whispering that they are being robbed. My dad would not forget grabbing the phone and telling me to call the police. My brother had called them almost right after, and they were calm. There was not enough time for them to go from hiding upstairs in terror to casually relaxing at home with no memory of any danger. The more I tried to make it normal, the less normal it became. And the worst part was that we never really talked about it again. Not properly. My brother knew I had called him in a panic. He knew I had told him there was a break-in. He knew he called Mom and found out everything was fine. My parents knew I had asked strange questions afterward, but none of us sat down and discussed it like a family mystery. Nobody wanted to go over every detail. Nobody wanted to admit out loud that something impossible had happened, because if we talked about it too much, then we would have to face what it meant. For me, there were only a few choices, and none of them were comfortable. Either I had somehow heard a phone call that never happened, which made me sound like I had a loose screw, or the phone system had done something so strange and specific that it copied my parents' voices in a life or death situation. Or, worst of all, I had received some kind of call from another moment, another version of the day, another place where something really was happening to them. I do not like thinking about that last one. But sometimes I still do. Sometimes I wonder if somewhere that robbery did happen. I wonder if there was another version of that day where my mom and dad really were upstairs, whispering, terrified, while someone moved through the house below them. I wonder if my mom, in that moment, reached for her phone and called me because she did not know what else to do. I wonder if my dad took the phone and told me to call the police because he thought it was their only chance. And somehow, for one short call, it came through to me. Then it was gone. I know how that sounds. I know most people would rather believe I misunderstood something or made it up. I would probably think the same thing if someone told me this story. It is easier that way. It is easier to believe a person is confused than to believe the world can glitch so badly that a phone call from something impossible can land in your hand. But I remember my mom's voice. I remember how scared she sounded. I remember my dad in the background, trying to keep her calm. I remember him taking the phone and telling me to call the police. I remember calling my brother, telling him to get over there. I remember calling the police with my hands shaking. I remember my brother calling me back and saying they were fine, nothing was happening, they were just at home, like normal. And I remember looking at my phone afterward and seeing that the call was still there. That is why I cannot forget it. We never talked about it again, not really, because talking about it would mean admitting that something happened that none of us could explain. It would mean saying out loud that I got a call from my mom that she never made. It would mean accepting that, for a few terrifying minutes, I heard my parents in danger when they were perfectly safe. So the story just stayed with me, quiet and uncomfortable, like a locked room in the back of my mind. Every now and then, when my phone rings and I see my mom's name on the screen, I feel that same cold shock in my chest before I answer. Most of the time, it is nothing. She asks a normal question. She tells me something simple. She sounds like herself. But for 1 second, before I pick up, I always remember that call. The one she says she never made. Sorry to pause for just a moment. If this is your first time here, welcome. I hope you're enjoying the calm so far. If you'd like more nights like this, true stories, gentle rain, no interruptions, please subscribe to Lacuna Noir. It really helps me keep creating these peaceful experiences for you. And tap the bell so you're here every time a new story arrives in the dark. Now, back to the story. I still do not know how to explain what happened that morning, and I have stopped trying to make people believe me. Most people don't want to believe things like this anyway. They listen, they nod, and then they try to find the normal answer because that makes the world feel safer. They say maybe we got turned around. Maybe we lost track of time. Maybe the phones glitched. Maybe the rangers were mistaken. Maybe the trees made the light seem strange. Maybe I have heard all of it. But I was there. My dad was there. My friend was there. And all three of us remember the same thing. We were only gone for a few minutes. That was what made it so hard to understand. We did not go deep into the woods. We did not hike for miles. We did not leave the trail and wander through thick brush until we got lost. We were camping at a regular campsite, the kind families use all the time. There were other campers nearby, fire pits, picnic tables, parked trucks, coolers, folding chairs, and the usual sound of people waking up early in the woods. It was not some lonely place far away from the world. It felt normal. Safe, even. My dad had taken me camping there before, but this time I brought a close friend with us. We had been looking forward to it all week. We packed too much food, too many snacks, and not enough warm clothes, which is how most camping trips seem to go. We got there the evening before, set up the tent, made a fire, and spent the night doing the usual things. We cooked hot dogs, burned marshmallows, laughed at dumb jokes, and listened to the forest settle down around us as the sky got darker. There was a ravine not far from our campsite. You could see the opening of the path from where we were staying. It was close enough that it never felt like a real hike. The edge of the ravine was maybe a 3-minute walk away if you went slow. The trees opened up near it, and from there you could look down into a deep cut in the land where rocks, roots, and brush fell away into shadow. My dad had mentioned it the first night and said we should check it out in the morning, but he also warned us not to mess around too close to the edge. The next morning was clear and cool. I remember that very clearly because the light was sharp and bright between the trees. It was the kind of morning where everything smelled damp and clean. The fire pit still had a little smoke sitting in it from the night before, and the ground had that wet dirt smell that only seems to exist in campgrounds. Somewhere nearby, someone was making breakfast, and we could smell bacon drifting through the trees. My dad looked at his phone and said it was just about 9 in the morning. My friend and I were already awake, walking around the campsite, kicking at leaves and talking about what we wanted to do that day. We had no reason to rush. The plan was simple. Walk to the ravine, take a look, maybe take a couple pictures, then come back and make breakfast. I remember checking my own phone, too. It said 9 a.m., or close to it. I did not have great service there, but the time was showing like normal. My friend checked his because he was hoping he had enough battery to take pictures later. His phone said the same thing. We left the campsite with my dad leading the way. The path was easy to follow. It was not really a trail so much as a worn line through the grass and dirt where other campers had walked before. There were trees on both sides, but they were not thick enough to hide the campsite completely. If you turned around, you could still see pieces of it between the trunks. You could see the color of our tent. You could see the picnic table. You could hear a car door shut somewhere behind us. Nothing felt strange at first. We reached the ravine quickly. It could not have taken more than 3 minutes, maybe even less. My dad stopped us before we got too close and told us again to stay back from the edge. We stood there, looking down into it. It was deeper than it looked from the campsite. The sides were steep, with roots sticking out like old fingers holding the dirt together. At the bottom, there were rocks and fallen branches, and everything down there looked darker than it should have, even with the morning sun above us. I remember the air feeling colder near the edge. Not freezing, not enough to make us complain, just cooler, like the ravine was breathing out old air from somewhere under the ground. My friend joked that it looked like the kind of place where someone in a movie would fall and no one would find them. My dad told him not to say stuff like that because it gave him bad luck. We were there for maybe 5 minutes. That is all. I know how long 5 minutes feels when you are just standing around looking at trees and rocks. We were not there long. My dad took one picture, but later the picture was not on his phone. My friend said he thought he took one too, but he could never find it either. I did not think much of it at the time because phone storage and bad service can do weird things. Back then, that part did not scare me as much as everything else. While we were standing there, I noticed something odd about the quiet. It was not silent exactly, but it felt pressed down. The campground noises had faded. No voices, no car doors, no bacon smell, no birds either, now that I think about it. Just wind moving lightly through the trees and the faint sound of leaves rubbing together. Then my dad said we should head back. We turned around and walked the same path back toward camp. That was when everything changed. At first, I thought clouds had moved over the sun. The light in the trees looked dimmer. The path ahead seemed darker than it had before, and the trunks looked almost black in places. I remember looking up through the branches, expecting to see a thick cloud blocking the sky, but what I saw made my stomach tighten. The sky was not morning sky anymore. It was dark, not completely black like midnight, but dark enough that the day was gone. The trees were shapes now. The space between them was blue-gray. It looked like late evening, the kind of light you get right after sunset when you can still see, but everything has lost its color. For a second, none of us said anything. We just stopped walking and stared. My friend was the first one to speak. He said, "What the hell?" My dad did not answer. He turned around and looked back toward the ravine, like maybe the light was still normal behind us. It was not. The ravine was even darker now, and the trees around it looked like they had closed in. I remember feeling confused before I felt scared. My brain kept trying to fix what I was seeing. Maybe we had walked under thicker trees. Maybe we were in shadow. Maybe my eyes were adjusting. Maybe the sun had gone behind a storm cloud. But there was no storm. There was no thunder, no wind picking up, no rain smell. It was just suddenly evening. Then we heard someone yelling. At first it was faint, coming from the direction of the campsite. My dad called back. Another voice answered. Then another. Flashlights moved between the trees, bright white beams cutting through the dark. That was when I realized people were searching for us. Rangers came toward us fast, along with a couple of campers. One of the rangers looked angry and relieved at the same time. He kept asking where we had been. My dad told him we had only walked to the ravine and back. The ranger stared at him like he thought my dad was lying. He said they had been looking for us for hours. Hours, I remember that word more than anything. It did not fit inside my head. Hours made no sense. We had been gone maybe 10 minutes total. 3 minutes there, 5 minutes standing near the ravine, 3 minutes back. That was it. Even if we were wrong, even if we had stayed longer than we thought, there was no way it had been ours. My dad got defensive, not in a rude way, but in the way people do when reality suddenly feels unfair. He pulled out his phone and said, "It's 9 in the morning. We just left." The ranger looked at him like he did not know what to say. My dad turned the phone screen around, and I saw it too. The time still said 9 a.m. I pulled mine out with shaking hands. Mine said the same. My friend's phone did too. 3 different phones, all showing morning, while we stood in the woods in near darkness with rangers holding flashlights on us. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Then, while we were standing there, while the ranger was looking at my dad's phone, the time changed. It did not tick forward like normal. It flipped. 1 second it said 9 a.m., and the next it jumped to 7 p.m. I watched it happen. My dad watched it happen. My friend made a sound like he had been punched in the chest. The ranger's face changed completely. Up until that moment, I think he believed we were lying or confused. After that, he did not look sure of anything. My phone changed too. So did my friends. All at once, like something had finally caught up to us. The little numbers on the screens became evening, matching the dark around us. I stared at my phone until the screen went dim in my hand. The ranger asked if we were hurt. My dad said no. Then the ranger asked again where we had been, slower this time. My dad pointed back toward the ravine and said we had gone there, stood for a few minutes, and walked back. That was all. They told us they had started looking when my dad did not answer his phone, and another camper noticed our site had been empty for too long. At first, no one was worried. People wander around campgrounds all the time. But then, more time passed. Someone said they had seen us walking toward the ravine in the morning. A ranger checked the area. Then, more rangers came. They searched the ravine edge, the paths, the trees nearby, and even called down into the bottom. They said they had walked right through the area where we claimed we had been. They did not see us. That part bothered my dad the most. He kept saying, we were right there, over and over again. We were right there. The ranger did not argue with him. He just looked tired and uneasy. He told us to come back to the campsite and not go near the ravine again that night. Nobody needed to tell me twice. Walking back with him felt worse than the moment we noticed the dark. There were flashlights everywhere. Other campers watched us like we were something strange that had stepped out of the woods. Some looked relieved. Some looked annoyed. Some looked scared. I remember one woman standing near her camper with a blanket around her shoulders, staring at us without blinking. She had probably spent part of her day hearing that 3 people had vanished near the ravine, and now here we were, walking back like nothing had happened. But something had happened. Our campsite looked wrong in the dark. The tent was exactly where we left it. Our chairs were still around the cold fire pit. The cooler was still under the table. Everything was normal, except the whole day was gone. Breakfast had never happened. The afternoon had never happened. The morning we thought we were still standing inside had somehow turned into evening without us. My dad checked his call log. There were missed calls from the ranger station and from a number he did not know. But the times were strange. Some showed times that had not existed on his phone until a moment ago. My friend kept unlocking and locking his screen like he expected it to go back to 9. I remember him whispering, "No, no, no," under his breath, like he was trying to wake himself up. The rangers asked us questions for a while. They wanted to know if we saw anyone, heard anything, felt sick, smelled anything unusual, or remembered falling asleep. We told them no. We had not seen anyone. We had not eaten anything weird. We had not taken anything. We had not gone off the path. We had not climbed down the ravine. We had not lost consciousness, at least not in any way we could remember. From our side, there was no gap. We walked there in the morning and came back in the evening. That was the whole story, and that was the problem. A normal missing person story has a gap in it. There is a place where memory breaks. Someone gets lost. Someone panics. Someone takes the wrong turn. Someone falls. Someone gets hurt. But we remembered every step. We remembered the ravine, the cold air, the dim quiet, turning back, and then seeing the dark. There was no missing section inside our heads. The missing part belonged to the world around us. My dad decided we were leaving the next morning. He would have left that night if the rangers had not suggested it was safer to wait until daylight. None of us slept well. My friend and I stayed in the tent, listening to every sound outside. The campground had gone quiet by then, but I could still hear distant voices from the ranger area and the occasional crunch of footsteps on gravel. At some point, I looked at my phone again. It was just after midnight. The time was normal now. The battery was lower than it should have been, but not dead. I stared at the screen for a long time, waiting for it to jump again. It never did. My dad barely spoke the next morning while packing. He moved fast, like the campsite itself had become something dangerous. My friend did not joke around at all. None of us suggested walking back to the ravine in daylight. I think part of me wanted to look, just to prove it was only a ravine, only trees and rocks and dirt. But a bigger part of me knew better. As we drove out, I looked back once through the rear window. The path to the ravine was visible from the campsite, just like before. It looked harmless in the morning sun. A short walk, 3 minutes at most. That was what scared me most. It was not some deep, hidden place. It was not a cave or an abandoned building or a trail deep in the mountains. It was right there, close enough that people could see where we went. Close enough that rangers searched the area and should have found us. Close enough that we should have heard people calling our names. But we heard nothing. For years afterward, my dad did not like talking about it. If I brought it up, he would get quiet and say he did not know what happened. My friend and I talked about it more when we were younger, usually late at night when we were trying to scare each other. But it never felt like a fun, scary story. It felt too real. There was no monster to blame, no stranger in the woods, no creepy face looking at us from the trees. Just time folding wrong around one small place and then snapping back when we returned. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we had stayed at the ravine longer. From our side, 5 minutes became 10 hours. What would an hour have become? A day? A week? Would we have walked back to find the campsite empty and the season changed? Or would we have never come back at all? I also wonder if the rangers really searched everywhere they said they did. Not because I think they lied, but because I believe them. I believe they walked that path. I believe they stood near the ravine. I believe they called for us. I believe they looked in the exact place where we should have been. And somehow, we were not there. The only proof we ever had was each other. 3 people with the same memory. 3 phones that showed 9 in the morning while the sky was dark. 3 screens that jumped to 7 at the same time while a ranger stood there watching. That should be enough, but it never feels like enough when you are trying to explain something impossible. So I do not try much anymore. I just tell the story the way it happened. We went camping. We walked to the edge of a ravine at 9 in the morning. We stood there for a few minutes. Then we walked back. And by the time we returned, the whole day was gone. This happened to me back in the late 1990s, when I was in my 20s and still at that age where going to a big electronics convention felt like stepping into the future. It was one of those huge events in a major U.S. city, the kind that filled an entire convention center and brought in thousands of people from all over. Companies had booths set up everywhere, showing off new gadgets, computers, cameras, sound systems, software, and all kinds of strange little devices that seemed exciting at the time. Looking back now, a lot of that stuff probably seems outdated, but back then, it felt new and impressive. I had been looking forward to it for a while. I was into electronics, and even though I was not some big industry person, I liked seeing what was coming next. The internet was becoming a bigger part of everyday life. Computers were changing fast. And every year there seemed to be some new thing that everyone was talking about. So when I heard about the convention, I decided to go. I remember driving into the city that morning and already feeling that mix of excitement and stress that comes with going to a big event. Traffic was heavy. Parking was a pain. I had to circle around for a while before I found a place to leave my car, and even then it was not exactly close to the convention center. I parked, checked that I had my wallet and ticket information, locked the car, and started walking. The walk itself was not too bad, but it was long enough that by the time I reached the building, I already felt like I had gone through part of the day. There were people everywhere, all heading in the same direction. Some were dressed casually, like me. Some were wearing company shirts or badges. Some had briefcases, backpacks, tote bags, or folders tucked under their arms. Everyone seemed to be talking about what they wanted to see first, where their booth was, or who they were supposed to meet. The convention center was massive. It had that cold, echoing feeling those places always have, with high ceilings, polished floors, bright lights, and signs hanging from the ceiling, pointing people toward different halls. There was a short line to get in, not too bad, just enough waiting to make me stand there and take everything in. People were moving past in every direction. Security was around, but not in the way you would see today. It was the late 90s, and things felt different then. There were guards near entrances and people checking passes, but there was not the same feeling of cameras watching every corner or metal detectors everywhere. After a few minutes, I got inside. Someone checked my pass, and then I was in one of the large convention halls. At first, it was exactly what I expected. Loud, crowded, bright, and busy. There were rows and rows of displays with banners, posters, glowing screens, stacks of brochures, and people trying to get your attention. Some booths had small crowds gathered around them because they were showing off something interesting. Others had salespeople standing at the edge of their space, smiling and trying to pull people in. You could hear music from one area, a microphone demonstration from another, and the constant low roar of hundreds or maybe thousands of voices blending together. I walked around for a while, taking it all in. I stopped at a few booths. I picked up a couple of brochures. I watched a demo for some computer hardware that seemed impressive at the time. There were people shoulder to shoulder in some spots, and then wider open areas between certain displays where the crowd spread out for a moment before closing back in again. It was the kind of place where you could bump into someone and not even think much of it, because people were moving everywhere and everyone was trying to look at different things. That is probably part of why the whole thing confused me so much at first. At a convention like that, being bumped into was not strange. People brushed past each other constantly. Someone might step backward without looking. Someone might turn too quickly. A shoulder might hit your arm. A bag might swing against your side. You expected small contact in a place like that. But this was different. I was walking through one of the more open sections between displays. I remember it clearly because there was a little more space there than in the crowded aisles. It was not empty, but it was open enough that people had room to move around each other. I was not rushing. I was just walking, looking ahead, maybe glancing side to side at the booths near me. That was when I noticed him. A man came out of the moving crowd ahead of me and started walking toward me. He did not look unusual in a way that would have made me afraid right away, but something about the way he moved caught my attention. He had dark hair and was wearing a dark button-down shirt. He had sunglasses on, even though we were indoors under bright convention lights. That alone was a little odd, but not enough to make a scene. People wore sunglasses indoors sometimes, especially in cities, especially at big events where everyone wanted to look important or busy. He also had a jacket folded over his left arm. He was holding it against his stomach, almost like he was carrying it carefully. His right hand was crossed in front of him, hidden under or behind the jacket. At the time, I noticed it, but only in that quick way you notice things when someone is coming toward you. I did not stop and stare. I did not think, this man is dangerous. I just saw him as another person moving through the convention hall. But then he changed direction. He did not simply walk in a straight line and accidentally cross my path. He veered toward me. It was not a big dramatic turn. It was small, smooth, and intentional. The kind of movement you only understand after it has already happened. He came toward me like he had chosen me, like he had decided where he was going, and I just happened to be the target. Before I could react, he slammed into me. It was not a normal bump. It was not someone accidentally brushing shoulders. He hit me hard enough to make me stop in place. At the same time, I felt something drag across my left forearm. It was fast, but very forceful. A sharp scraping motion. Not deep like a cut, but hard and direct. It felt like he had something in his right hand and had scraped it along my skin on purpose as he passed. The jacket over his arm had hidden what he was doing until the moment it happened. He did not apologize. He did not look surprised. He did not even slow down. He just kept going. For a second, my brain did not understand what had happened. I stopped walking and turned around. The man was already moving away, not running exactly, but speed walking into the crowd. He was moving with purpose, weaving through people, disappearing between bodies and booths like he already knew where he was going. I looked down at my arm. My left forearm was not bleeding. There was no open wound that I could see. But there was a clear mark on my skin. It was a white scrape, about 1/4 of an inch wide and maybe 3 inches long. It looked like something had been dragged across me with pressure. Not enough to break the skin, at least not obviously, but enough to leave a mark that was impossible to ignore. I stood there, staring at it, completely dumbfounded. The whole thing had happened in a few seconds. One moment I was walking through a convention hall, surrounded by normal noise and normal people, and the next moment some stranger deliberately crashed into me and scraped my arm with something hidden under his jacket. I remember looking around, almost expecting someone else to have noticed. But no one seemed to care. People just kept moving around me. Someone walked past with a bag full of brochures. A man nearby was talking loudly about a display. A woman laughed at something her coworker said. The convention went on as if nothing had happened. That made it worse somehow. I felt like something serious had happened, but the world around me did not react. There was no shout, no security guard rushing over, no one asking if I was okay. Just me standing there, holding my arm, trying to understand why a stranger had done that. After a few seconds, shock turned into anger. I suddenly thought, no, I am not just going to let this guy walk away. I started after him. At first, I thought I could catch him. He had only been gone for a few seconds. I had seen the direction he went. He had dark hair, sunglasses, a dark shirt, and that jacket over his arm. I pushed forward through the crowd, trying not to lose sight of the area where he had disappeared. But it was useless almost immediately. The convention hall was too crowded. People were everywhere. There were too many dark shirts, too many jackets, too many men moving between displays. Every time I thought I saw someone who might be him, the person would turn and look completely different, or vanish behind a booth or blend into a group. I moved faster, looking left and right, scanning faces. But he was gone. It felt impossible. He had been right there. He had just touched me. I had seen him walking away, but within seconds, he had vanished into the crowd like he had never existed. That was when the fear really hit me. At first, I had been confused, then angry. But once I could not find him, my mind started filling in the blanks, and none of the possibilities were good. What had he scraped me with? Why did he do it? Was it just some random crazy person? Was it a prank? Was he trying to cut me? Did he think he had cut me? Was there something on whatever he used? Had he scratched me with a dirty object, a needle, a blade, a piece of metal, something chemical? I know that might sound dramatic, but when a stranger attacks you in a way that makes no sense, your mind goes to strange places. It was not like someone shoved me because they were angry or because I was in their way. He had hidden his hand. He had angled toward me. He had scraped my bare arm. Then he had disappeared. That felt planned. I looked at my arm again. The white scrape was still there. No blood, but the skin looked marked. I could feel where it had happened. My whole arm suddenly felt dirty, even though I could not see anything on it. I started wondering if something had been left behind on my skin. I wondered if the object had been contaminated. I wondered if he had been trying to infect me with something. I wondered if I was overreacting. But my body did not care whether I was being reasonable or not. My stomach had gone tight. My mouth felt dry. I could feel my heart beating harder. The noise of the convention hall suddenly seemed too loud, too close, too crowded. Every person near me felt like they were in my way. Every stranger brushing past me made me tense up. I turned away from the displays and went straight to the men's room. I remember walking quickly, almost too quickly, trying not to look like I was panicking. When I got inside, I went right to the sink. There were a few other men in there, washing their hands or adjusting their badges or looking in the mirror, but I barely noticed them. I turned on the water and shoved my forearm under it. Then I washed. I washed the scrape again and again. I used soap. I rubbed the skin hard. I rinsed it. Then I soaped it again. I kept doing it, probably a dozen times, maybe more. I washed until the skin around the mark started to turn red from the rubbing. I washed as if I could remove the feeling of what had happened, as if enough soap and hot water could erase the fact that a stranger had put something against my body and walked away. People came and went behind me, but I did not care. I kept looking at the scrape under the bathroom lights. It still did not look like a proper cut. There was no blood. That should have made me feel better, but it did not. The mark was still clear enough that I knew I had not imagined it. Something had touched me hard enough to leave proof. I tried to calm myself down. I told myself that if the skin was not broken, maybe I was fine. Maybe the guy had just been holding something like a pen or a badge clip or a piece of plastic, and it scraped me by accident. Maybe he was rude and in a hurry. Maybe he had not aimed for me. Maybe I had misunderstood everything. But the problem was that I had seen the way he moved. He had come toward me on purpose. That was the part I could not talk myself out of. He had not looked surprised. He had not turned around. He had not said sorry. He had not even reacted like someone who had accidentally bumped a stranger. He had scraped my arm and then moved faster into the crowd. After I finished washing my arm, I dried it with paper towels and stood there for a moment, looking at myself in the mirror. I remember feeling foolish and scared at the same time. Part of me wanted to find security and report it. Another part of me thought, what am I even going to say? A man bumped into me and scraped my arm, but I do not know what he used, I do not know where he went, and I do not have any injury except a white mark. In a big convention center, with thousands of people, it felt impossible that anyone would be able to do anything. There were no phone cameras in every hand back then. There was no quick way to take a picture of the guy. I did not even have a good enough description beyond dark hair, dark shirt, sunglasses, jacket over his arm. In a city convention hall, that could have described 100 men. So I went back out. I tried to continue walking around the convention like nothing had happened. I went past more exhibits. I stopped at a booth or two. I tried to read the signs and look interested. I still had the brochures in my hand. The event was still loud and bright and full of energy. People were still excited, still talking, still crowding around displays. But everything felt different now. Before, the crowd had felt exciting. Now it felt unsafe. Every person who came too close made me tense. Every man with sunglasses or a jacket made my eyes follow him. I kept checking my arm. I looked at the scrape again and again, waiting for it to change, waiting for it to sting, waiting for it to bleed, waiting for some sign that whatever had happened was worse than it looked. Nothing changed. That almost made it more unsettling. There was no clear emergency, no obvious wound, no easy explanation. Just this strange little attack that had happened and then vanished into the noise of the convention. I felt like I was carrying a secret that no one else could see. I probably stayed a little longer because I did not want to admit how shaken I was. I had gone there to enjoy the convention, and part of me wanted to prove to myself that I was not scared away by one strange person. But I was not enjoying anything anymore. I could not focus on the displays. I could not listen to the sales pitches. I kept replaying the moment in my head. The jacket over his arm, his hidden hand, the way he angled toward me, the scrape, the way he kept going without a word. Eventually, I knew I had to leave. I walked out earlier than I had planned. I remember the air outside feeling different, almost like I had stepped out of a place that was too bright and too crowded. I made my way back toward the parking area, still checking behind me once in a while, still looking at people around me more carefully than before. When I got to my car, I sat there for a moment before starting it. I looked at my forearm again. The scrape was still there, but it was not bleeding. It did not look infected or swollen. It was just a mark, a simple white mark on my skin. If someone had seen it, they probably would not have thought anything of it. But I knew how it got there. I drove home early, and the whole way back I kept thinking about what could have happened. I wondered if I should go to a doctor. I wondered if I should report it. I wondered if the guy had done it to anyone else that day. Maybe I had not been the only one. Maybe he was moving through the crowd, doing it again and again, touching people with whatever he had hidden in his hand. Maybe I was the only one who noticed. Maybe others brushed it off as a normal bump. That thought bothered me more than I expected. At home, I washed my arm again. I checked the scrape under better light. It still looked minor, but I could not stop thinking about it. I do not remember exactly how long the mark stayed, but I remember the fear staying longer than the mark did. For days afterward, I paid attention to my body in a way I normally never did. If I felt tired, I wondered if it meant something. If my arm itched, I checked it. If I felt even slightly off, I thought back to that man. I knew I might have been letting my imagination run away with me, but I also knew something real had happened. I had been touched by a stranger in a deliberate and hidden way, and I had no idea why. That is the part that still stays with me. If he had tried to rob me, at least I would understand it. If he had yelled at me or shoved me because he was angry, at least there would be some reason, even a stupid one. But this was quiet. Quick, planned. He came out of the crowd, scraped my arm with something hidden under a jacket, and disappeared without a word. I never found out who he was. I never found out what he was holding. I never found out whether he meant to hurt me or scare me, or whether I was just one random person in some strange thing he was doing that day. Nothing ever came of it, as far as I know. I did not get sick. I did not find a wound later. Life went on. But I still think about it. Even now, years later, I can picture him walking toward me through that open space between the displays. Dark hair, dark shirt, sunglasses indoors, jacket folded over his arm. right hand hidden underneath. I can still feel that hard scrape against my forearm, that sudden shock of realizing someone had done something to me before I even understood what was happening. And I still remember how fast he vanished. That might be the scariest part. Not the mark, not even the scrape itself. It was the way he disappeared, back into the crowd, swallowed by all those normal people, leaving me standing there with no answers and no way to prove what had really happened. For everyone else, that day was just another electronics convention. For me, it became a reminder that sometimes the most frightening things do not come with screams, blood, or dramatic danger. Sometimes they happen in bright rooms full of people in the middle of the day, while everyone around you keeps walking like nothing happened. Sometimes a stranger can choose you for one small moment, do something that makes no sense, and then vanish before your mind can even catch up. And the worst part is that you may never know why. When I was in high school, I lived on the edge of a small suburb. It was one of those quiet neighborhoods where the houses slowly spread out until they almost touched the woods. If you drove a few minutes away from the main streets, everything started to feel less like a town and more like the middle of nowhere. The streetlights became fewer. The houses sat farther apart. The trees grew thicker. At night, the whole area could feel almost empty. Our neighborhood backed right up against the stretch of woods. Behind those woods, there was a little winding road that ran along a creek. It was not a road people used unless they lived nearby or knew the area well. It curved a lot, and in some places the trees leaned so close over it that it almost felt like driving through a tunnel. There were no streetlights there. None at all. Once the sun went down, the only light came from your headlights. The moon, if it was out, and maybe the distant glow of a house far away through the trees. Most of the time, I did not think much of it. I had grown up around that area, and I knew the roads well enough. Still, I always drove carefully on that road, especially late at night. Deer were common around there. Sometimes they would come out of nowhere, standing in the middle of the road like they had no idea a car was coming. Other animals crossed too, and because the road twisted near the creek, you never had a clear view too far ahead. You had to pay attention. One night, when I was still in high school, I was driving home from a friend's house. It was around 1 in the morning. I was not drunk, I was not speeding, I was not doing anything reckless, at least not at first. I was just tired and ready to get home. The roads were empty, the kind of empty where you feel like you are the only person awake for miles. There were no cars behind me, no headlights coming toward me, no porch lights shining through the trees, just my car, the road, and the darkness around it. I remember the sound of the tires on the pavement and the low hum of the engine. The inside of the car felt warm and quiet. I had the radio low, or maybe it was off completely. I cannot remember that part clearly. What I do remember is how dark it was outside the windshield. My headlights were cutting through the blackness, showing me only a small piece of the road at a time. Every curve appeared right before I reached it, and beyond the light, everything disappeared into the trees. The road followed the creek for a while. During the day, that part of the drive was actually kind of pretty. You could see the water moving between the rocks, and the woods looked peaceful. At night, it was different. The creek was mostly invisible, but sometimes you could catch a pale reflection from the water through the trees. The woods seemed deeper than they really were. Every branch looked like it was reaching toward the road. Every shadow looked like it could be hiding something. I was being careful because I did not want to hit a deer. I kept both hands on the wheel and watched the road. I was not going fast. I had no reason to. It was late, but I was close enough to home that I was not in a rush. I knew that road had sharp bends, and I knew how easily something could step out in front of me. Then I did something stupid. I do not even know why I did it. Maybe I was bored. Maybe I was curious. Maybe because I was young and alone and felt too comfortable on a road I had driven many times before, I wanted to see just how dark it really was without my headlights. It was one of those dumb thoughts that enters your mind for a second, and instead of ignoring it like a normal person, you actually do it. I took my foot off the gas, but I did not stop. I did not even slow down much. I just reached for the switch and turned my headlights off for a second. The world vanished. I mean that in the most honest way. The second the headlights went out, everything in front of me disappeared. It was not just dark. It was pitch black. The road was gone. The trees were gone. The curve ahead was gone. The only thing I could see was maybe a thin piece of moonlight breaking through the branches here and there, but it was not enough to help me. It was the kind of darkness that makes your eyes feel useless. I instantly realized how stupid it was. It only took a second, maybe less than that. The darkness felt so complete that my body reacted before my brain had time to think. My hand went right back to the switch, and I turned the headlights on again. That was when I saw him. A man was standing directly in front of my car. He was maybe 20 feet away, right near the curve in the road. He was close enough that my headlights lit him up clearly. He was standing in the lane, facing me, not walking, not stepping aside, just standing there. He was dressed in black, from what I could see. Dark clothes, dark shape, almost like he had come out of the darkness itself. The headlights hit him all at once, and he was staring straight at me, not looking confused, not shielding his eyes, not jumping back like a normal person would if a car suddenly appeared in front of them. He was just staring. I felt ice go through my whole body. It was not a slow kind of fear. It hit me all at once. My heart jumped so hard it felt like it slammed into my ribs. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. For a second, I thought I was going to lose control because my body reacted faster than my mind could understand what I was seeing. My first thought was that I could have hit him. If I had kept my lights off for even 1 or 2 seconds longer, I might have driven right into him. I had not seen him before I turned them off. There was no warning, no movement, no flashlight, no reflective clothes. Nothing. He had been hidden in the darkness, standing in the road, and I had only seen him because I turned my lights back on in time. I did not slam on the brakes. I cannot really explain why. Maybe because he was close, but not close enough that I had to stop instantly. Maybe because I was so shocked that I just kept moving. Maybe because some part of me knew that stopping would be worse. I remember jerking a little, maybe easing the wheel, maybe moving around him, but the whole moment felt like it happened too fast and too slow at the same time. As I passed him, I did not see him move. I did not see him wave. I did not see him turn away. In my memory, he stayed there, standing near the curve, staring at me as I drove past. I wanted to look in the rearview mirror, but I was scared of what I might see. I still glanced anyway, because fear makes you do strange things. Behind me, the road was swallowed by darkness again, and I could not clearly see him anymore. My mind started racing. Who was he? Why was he standing there? It was around 1 in the morning on a back road with no streetlights, beside the woods and a creek. There were no sidewalks, no nearby stores, no reason for someone to be walking there, especially dressed in black. If he had been a person who needed help, why was he not waving me down? Why was he not standing on the side of the road? Why was he standing directly in the lane, right where a car could hit him? At first, I tried to make normal explanations. Maybe he was a local guy walking home. Maybe his car had broken down somewhere. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he lived nearby and decided to take a walk. But none of those thoughts made me feel better. A normal person walking at night would hear a car coming and move out of the way. A normal person would not stand still in the road in pitch black darkness wearing black clothes. Then, I started thinking about the timing. I had turned my headlights off for only a second. Just one stupid second. When I turned them back on, he was right there. It almost felt like the darkness had revealed him, or maybe like he had been waiting inside it. If I had not turned the lights off, would I have seen him sooner? Maybe, but I honestly do not know. The curve in the road was close, and he was standing in just the right place to appear suddenly. The thought that scared me most was that maybe he had been standing there on purpose. Maybe he wanted someone to stop. Maybe he was waiting for a driver to panic. Maybe there were other people in the woods. Maybe if I had hit the brakes and stopped the car, something worse would have happened. At the time, I did not know about all the stories people tell about traps on empty roads, but the feeling was still there. It felt wrong. It felt like I had come too close to something I was not supposed to understand. I kept driving. I did not stop to ask if he needed help. I did not turn around. I did not call out the window. I did not pull over once I was past him. I just kept going, gripping the steering wheel, staring ahead, and trying to keep my breathing steady. Every curve after that felt dangerous. Every shadow looked like another person might be standing there. I kept expecting to see him again, maybe farther ahead on the road, standing in my headlights like he had somehow gotten in front of me. I kept checking the mirrors, afraid I would see him behind me, walking in the middle of the road or running after the car. I saw nothing, but that did not make me feel safe. The woods felt different now. Before, they were just trees. After seeing him, they felt full of hiding places. I was suddenly aware of how alone I was. There were no other cars, no houses close enough to run to. No one would have known right away if something happened to me out there. My phone might have had service, or it might not have. I do not remember. All I remember is wanting to get home as fast as I could without crashing. I started thinking about how close I had been to making a much worse mistake. Turning off my headlights had been stupid, but what if that stupid action had saved me in a strange way? What if turning them off and then back on made me notice him at the last possible second? Or what if, by turning them off, I missed seeing him earlier and almost hit him because of it? I could not decide which thought was worse. My body stayed tense the whole way home. I kept my headlights on high alert, watching every inch of road. I slowed down more than usual around each bend. I did not care how late it was anymore. I just wanted to reach my neighborhood, where there were houses and driveways and normal lights. I wanted to be away from the creek road and the trees. When I finally got closer to home, I felt a little safer, but not completely. I did not stop until I pulled into my driveway. Even then, I sat in the car for a moment, listening to the engine, staring out at the dark street. My hands were still shaking a little. My mind kept replaying the image of him in my headlights. A man dressed in black, standing in the road, staring right at me. I never found out who he was. I never heard anything about a missing person or a man wandering that road. I never saw him again. Maybe there was a simple explanation. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he was lost. Maybe he was just some strange guy walking in the worst possible place at the worst possible time. But I still think about it sometimes. I think about how dark that road was when the headlights were off. I think about how he would have been completely invisible until it was too late. I think about how he did not react like someone who was surprised by a car. He did not jump. He did not move away. He just stood there, looking straight at me. And the part that stays with me most is not just that I saw him. It is the fact that if I had kept my headlights off for even a moment longer, I might have hit him. Or I might have stopped. And I am honestly not sure which would have been worse. The house we lived in back then was in Southern California, sometime from the late 90s into the early 2000s. And even now, I do not like thinking about it for too long. It was one of those places that looked normal from the outside. Nothing about it screamed haunted. It was not some old broken-down mansion on a hill. It was not covered in dead vines or sitting alone at the end of a dirt road. It was just a regular house in SoCal, the kind of place people drive past without ever thinking twice. But inside that house, things happened that none of us could explain. And after a while, the place stopped feeling like a home and started feeling like something we were trapped inside. At first, the strange things were small enough that we tried to ignore them. That is how it always starts, I think. Something happens once, and you tell yourself there has to be a normal reason. A door opens on its own, and you blame the latch. A noise comes from another room, and you blame the house settling. A shape moves out of the corner of your eye, and you say it was just a shadow. You do that because the alternative is too uncomfortable. Nobody wants to admit that the place they sleep in every night may not be as empty as it looks. But the more it happened, the harder it became to explain. Locked doors would open by themselves, not just gently swing open like the wind pushed them. They would open and then slam shut, hard enough to make your whole body jump. The first few times, we tried to blame the lock or the frame. Maybe the door had not really been shut all the way. Maybe the house shifted. Maybe there was air pressure moving through the rooms. But after a while, those explanations felt weak. When you know a door was locked, and then you hear it open and slam, it changes the way you move through your own house. There were footsteps, too. That was one of the worst parts for me. Part of the house had a raised foundation, and you could hear movement on it clearly. If someone walked across that section, the sound carried in a very specific way. It was not the same as pipes, not the same as wood creaking, not the same as wind. It sounded like feet, real, steady footsteps. Sometimes they were slow, like someone walking from one side of the house to the other with no hurry. Other times they were lighter, almost careful, as if whoever or whatever it was did not want to be noticed, but could not stay completely silent. I cannot tell you how many times I stopped what I was doing and listened, waiting to hear a voice or see someone come around the corner. But no one ever did. The footsteps would move across the raised part of the house, then stop. Just stop. No door opening afterward, no person appearing, no explanation. Then there were the closets. Sometimes the clothes hanging inside would sway like someone had brushed against them. It would not be all of them moving together in some normal way like from a draft. It looked more like a person had pushed through them with a shoulder or a hand. One part of the clothes would shift, then another, then slowly settle back into place. I remember standing there more than once, staring at hanging shirts and jackets moving when there was no one near them. No open window, no fan, no animal inside the closet, just clothes swaying gently, as if something invisible had just passed through. That kind of thing gets into your head. You begin watching every little movement. You notice every sound. You stop trusting quiet rooms. Even when nothing is happening, you feel like something might happen at any second. But the strangest recurring thing was the sound of a party downstairs. That is the only way I know how to describe it. Multiple times, usually when the house was quiet, we would hear what sounded like a fancy gathering coming from downstairs. Not a loud party with music and shouting. It was more like an old-fashioned dinner party or cocktail party. Low, murmuring voices, the soft rise and fall of conversation, and the clear clinking of glasses. Sometimes it sounded like several people speaking at once, not loud enough to understand any words, but enough to know there were voices. Then there would be that delicate glass sound, like people touching wine glasses together or setting them down on a table. The first time I heard it, I thought maybe a TV had been left on. That would have made sense. A movie, a show, a radio, anything like that. But there was no TV on downstairs. No radio. No neighbors close enough for that sound to come through so clearly. And the sound always seemed to be inside the house, not outside it. It had depth. It had space. It sounded like people were gathered in our downstairs area, having a quiet, elegant party that we had not been invited to. Of course, whenever we checked, there was nothing there. No people. No lights on that we had not left on. No glasses moved. No sign that anything had happened. Just the empty downstairs, sitting there like it had not been full of voices a moment before. We had animals at the time, both dogs and cats, and I think their reactions made everything worse. Animals can make a strange house feel less scary because you tell yourself they would know if something was really wrong. But then when they react badly, it becomes much harder to stay calm. We had 2 dogs and 2 cats, and they all had their own personalities. The dogs would sometimes alert to sounds we could not explain, stiffening up and staring toward a doorway or a dark corner. The cats would freeze and look at empty spaces like they were watching something move there. I tried to keep things practical. Since we had cats, I kept their gravity feeder on the kitchen counter in a corner. It was easier that way, and it kept the dogs from getting into it. The feeder was not tiny. It had some weight to it, especially when it had food inside. It sat in its spot on the counter, tucked into the corner, where it should have been safe from being knocked over. The cats could get to it, but it was not sitting near the edge in a careless way. It was not the kind of thing that would just slide off by itself. One night I was upstairs in bed reading. My ex was at work, and I was waiting for them to get home. It was quiet in the house, the kind of quiet that already felt uncomfortable because of everything we had been dealing with. I was trying to relax, trying to read, trying not to think about the house too much. All the animals were in bed with me, which made me feel a little better. Both dogs were there, and both cats were there too. That mattered later, because it meant none of them were downstairs. Then I heard a loud crash from downstairs. It was not a small noise. It was not a normal house sound. It sounded like someone had dropped something heavy in the kitchen or somewhere close to it. The noise was sharp and sudden, loud enough that I stopped reading immediately. My whole body went cold. The dogs reacted at the same time. They perked up and started barking, but they did not jump off the bed and run downstairs the way they normally might have. That was what really bothered me. Their hackles were raised, and they were staring toward the bedroom door, barking like they were warning something away. But they stayed on the bed. They did not want to go down there. The cats reacted even worse. They freaked out and ran behind the bed. Cats do not always react the way you expect, but this was not playful or curious. They were scared. They bolted like something had startled them badly, and they wanted to hide. I sat there for a moment trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to stay in bed until my ex got home. Another part of me knew I had to check. The animals were all upstairs with me. If something had fallen downstairs, I needed to know what it was. If someone had broken in, I needed to know that too. But I hated the idea of walking down into that house after hearing that crash. I got up and went downstairs. I still remember how it felt moving through the house. Every step seemed too loud. The dogs kept barking from upstairs, but they still did not follow me. That made the whole thing feel even more wrong. Usually, if there was a noise, they wanted to investigate. This time, they were warning from a distance. I think some part of them knew there was something down there they did not want to face. When I reached the kitchen, I saw the cat feeder on the floor. It was not just lying under the counter like it had slipped off. It was in the middle of the kitchen. That feeder had been sitting on the counter in a corner. Now it was on the floor a good 6 feet away from where it should have been. 6 feet. It had not just tipped over the edge. It had not rolled there naturally. It looked like it had been picked up or thrown and dropped in the middle of the room. There were some pieces of cat food scattered around it, but most of the food had stayed inside the feeder. That detail bothered me too. If it had fallen from the counter and bounced or exploded open, I would have expected food everywhere. But it was mostly still inside, like the feeder had been moved with force, but not in a normal falling way. It was on the floor, out in the open, in a place it had no reason to be. I stood there, staring at it, trying to make the scene make sense. The cats had been upstairs with me. The dogs had been upstairs with me. My ex was not home. I had not been downstairs. No window was open in a way that could explain it. No one had come in. And even if some small earthquake had happened, because this was Southern California and people always bring up seismic activity, that still would not explain it. A tremor might knock something off the counter. Maybe. But it would not throw a feeder 6 feet into the middle of the kitchen while leaving most of the food inside. That was one of the moments when I stopped trying so hard to explain the house. Because yes, some things could maybe be blamed on the ground moving. In SoCal, you learn to accept that houses can shift, things can rattle, and strange noises can happen. A small quake can make doors move or objects fall. I am not saying every single thing was impossible. Some things in that house may have had normal causes. But not all of it. Not the feeder in the middle of the kitchen, not the locked doors opening and slamming shut, not the footsteps moving across the raised foundation when no one was there, not the clothes in the closet swaying like someone had just walked through them, not the sound of a fancy party downstairs, with murmuring voices and glasses clinking when the downstairs was empty. And definitely not the small things that would disappear and then reappear somewhere else. That happened often enough that it became part of life in that house. We would put something down in one place, and later it would be gone. Keys, little household items, things that should not move on their own. We would search everywhere, get frustrated, and sometimes even blame each other. Then, later, the missing thing would show up in a completely different place, sometimes somewhere we had already checked. Not hidden under something, not pushed behind furniture, just sitting out as if someone had placed it there. That may sound small compared to doors slamming or invisible parties, but it was one of the most exhausting parts. It made the house feel like it was playing with us, like it wanted us to doubt ourselves. You start asking questions you hate asking. Did I really leave it there? Did I forget? Did someone move it? Am I losing my mind? And when more than one person notices the same pattern, those questions become even worse. Living in that house changed the way I felt about being home. A home is supposed to be the place where you rest. It is supposed to be where you close the door against the world and feel safe. But that house never really let us relax. Even during normal moments, There was a tension under everything. You could be cooking, reading, watching TV, getting ready for bed, and still feel like the house was awake around you, waiting, listening, moving when you were not looking. After the feeder incident, I hated being alone there at night. I still did the things I had to do, because life goes on even when your house feels haunted. You still have to feed the animals. You still have to sleep. You still have to clean and work and answer the phone and act like everything is normal. But nothing felt normal. Every sound from downstairs made my stomach tighten. Every closed door made me wonder if it would open. Every quiet room felt like it might not actually be empty. The animals did not help much after that either. They seemed nervous in certain parts of the house. Sometimes they would avoid an area for no clear reason. Sometimes the dogs would stare and growl low at nothing we could see. Sometimes the cats would track movement with their eyes across a blank wall or an empty doorway. I know animals can react to bugs, shadows, little noises, and all kinds of things people miss. But in that house, their reactions felt connected to everything else. It felt like they were noticing the same things we were, maybe even more. We wanted out. That sounds simple, but getting out was not easy. It took a year and a half to sell the place. A year and a half is a long time when you are living somewhere you do not trust. Every showing, every delay, every failed step towards selling it felt like being pulled back into the house again. We were ready to leave long before we actually could. During that time, the activity did not suddenly stop. It was not constant every minute of every day, but it kept happening enough that the house never felt peaceful. There were always little reminders. A sound from below, a door moving, something missing, a strange feeling in a room, the memory of voices downstairs that should not have been there. The image of that feeder sitting in the middle of the kitchen, 6 feet from where it belonged. By the time we finally moved out, I did not feel sad leaving. Some people get emotional when they leave a house they lived in for years. They walk through the empty rooms and remember the good times. They touch the walls and think about everything that happened there. I did not feel that way. I wanted to be gone. I wanted the last box out. I wanted the door closed behind us. I wanted distance between us and that place. Maybe someone else moved in and never had a problem. Maybe the house went quiet for them. Maybe they blamed every sound on pipes and every missing item on forgetfulness. I do not know. I have no idea what happened there after we left, and honestly, I do not want to know. All I know is what happened when we lived there. Locked doors opened and slammed shut. Footsteps crossed parts of the house where no one was walking. Clothes moved in closets like someone unseen had brushed through them. More than once, we heard what sounded like a fancy party downstairs, quiet voices and clinking glasses drifting up from empty rooms. Things vanished and came back in places they should not have been. And one night, while every animal in the house was upstairs in bed with me, something sent the cat's feeder from the kitchen counter to the middle of the floor. Some people can explain away one strange thing, maybe even two. I tried to do that too. I wanted normal reasons. I wanted bad latches, house settling, small earthquakes, animals, drafts, anything. But after a while, explanations stopped being enough. That house was wrong. And when we finally sold it after a year and a half, I was just grateful we could move out and leave whatever was in there. Look, if you're still watching, you already know what this channel is. No jump scares, no fake drama, just real stories about real people who survived things most of us can't even imagine. And that's scarier than any movie could ever be. If you want more of this raw, unfiltered truth, told the way it deserves to be told, subscribe to Lacuna Noir. We're not here to waste your time. We're here to tell the stories that actually matter. Thanks for listening. Now go get some sleep, if you can.